Synthetic smoke.
Buddy up, buddy up, buddy up, buddy up!
entire service building that they have in Lafayette Park. First it started with like a trash dump, big trash thing, lighting on fire, like down the street. They finally, whatever, 2020, 2021, whatever it was, they just reopened. Like they just done all the shit. But they burnt that thing to a crisp. They like graffitied the shit out of it.
Restaurant?
No, it was like a bathroom, like work gardener shed. It was like a gardener shed for the park. But it had a bathroom and stuff in it, and it was basically, it was like in the, like earlier in the day we get there, and they're all sitting on it.
Oh, so this is, what is this?
Let the people liberate! Let the people liberate!
I'm scared more about physical injury or not being able to get over shit. There would have been failure. Food and water! Israel, stop the slaughter!
Stop food and water! Israel, stop the slaughter! Israel, stop the slaughter! There is only one solution! There is only one solution! Intifada revolution! Only one solution! Intifada revolution!
We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide! Leave this thing here, this megaphone. We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide! I borrowed that thing. I can't find it. We'll find you.
Make our way back to them. Where is this person?
Of the capital. So that was yesterday. That passed off peacefully and they were removed. But you see the officers with protective gear, with face masks on. Bear in mind that pepper spray was used earlier on this morning, and that's clearly their precaution against what may transpire as the day progresses. But as I say, the capital is that way. Demonstrators walking this way, away from the Capitol building, being directed away from the building by these police officers who are essentially providing a ring of protection around the building itself and all who occupy it. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, has been inside, as well as America's lawmakers, political representatives, for whom that is the workplace and who occupied the chamber for that address by Benjamin Netanyahu today, received by the Republican side heartily, round of applause, standing ovation. Democrats not so much. There were those who stayed away. Kamala Harris, the de facto presidential nominee, she wasn't there. She's campaigning. That was her reason given for not attending. There were others who stayed away in protest, Democrats who didn't want to attend, Democrats who are offended by Benjamin Netanyahu's prosecution of the conflict in the Middle East. So that was their protest. That clearly is awkward for Joe Biden as he prepares to meet Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow in the White House. Biden giving his speech tonight, of course. What he wants, perhaps more than anything else in terms of his legacy as an outgoing president, is peace in the Middle East. Right now, on the back of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech, that appears as far away as it has been for some time.
Yeah, James, that speech finished around an hour ago. Can you just give us a sense of the mood on the street where you are? Because we have seen pictures from earlier this afternoon in the middle of these protests. It appears to be flags and an effigy there being burnt. What is the mood like? Because obviously this is such a sensitive time for American politics in the Middle East. What are the protesters saying to you there about what's going to happen over the course of the day and perhaps into tomorrow?
I think the mood right now amongst these people is anger, and we have seen the American flags torn down outside Union Station and burned, an effigy of Benjamin Netanyahu burned. I think that's the pictures that you are looking at now. That was about 15, 20 minutes ago, so we're now departing that scene. I think the mood is anger amongst this crowd. This is very much targeted at Benjamin Netanyahu, and you look at the posters around, end all US aid to Israel, open the convention. The anger is directed very much towards Netanyahu, criticizing his role in what they would regard as genocide in the Middle East. So the timing and the tenor of this is directed towards the Israeli Prime Minister. And of course, he's in town not just today, but tomorrow. He meets Joe Biden in the White House. Biden is enlisting the help of his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, delaying his trip overseas to bring him into that meeting, to lean on Netanyahu. in an effort to bring about a ceasefire. Biden is also going to invoke the presence of the American families of hostages, bringing them in to lean further on Netanyahu. It's clearly Biden's effort to bring a semblance of peace, or at least put the Middle East on a trajectory towards peace before he leaves office in 5 months' time. His difficulty is that Netanyahu doesn't sound like he's budging. I think we got that from his hour-long speech in Congress. And Netanyahu, when he leaves this city, he goes to Florida, Mar-a-Lago on Friday, where he will talk with Donald Trump on the back of the Republican support he saw today. And perhaps that's where Netanyahu thinks he can do a deal with a man who might be president after November. A deal for Netanyahu, perhaps, that factors in Netanyahu's political future to any peace deal in the Middle East. And right now, perhaps that's where he will put his chips, with Trump rather than with Biden. We'll see.
James Matthews, thank you. James Matthews on the streets of Washington with the protesters there. We'll, of course, bring you Joe Biden's address that James mentioned there live a little later.
You guys are everything that's wrong with this place. You guys. invited Benjamin Netanyahu here, his first trip since that war began with Gaza 9 months ago. 39,000 people dead. Let's just have a little listen to what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say just over an hour ago.
The pain these families have endured is beyond words.
Move back!
Who's paying for all these fucking pigs? Who pays for these pigs?
By Union Square Station, police gathered around those protesters. There are thousands of people here holding placards that describe Benjamin Netanyahu as a war criminal, outraged that he's been invited to speak and address Congress. And as I said, there were Democratic lawmakers who stayed away from this address today. Although when you looked at the space there, it looked quite full. They weren't all members of Congress. They had brought in other people, we're told, to fill the space in. But as I said, applause punctuating every sentence that Benjamin Netanyahu made. This is as much about his political survival as well. He's trying to show a level of strength here. It's his first trip here to the United States since the war began. Fourth time he's addressing Congress. Let's bring in our James Matthews. Now, James, I can hear the helicopters above. And of course, the police down below. There are still hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the streets.
Yeah, several thousand, Yalda. I'm walking down Constitution Avenue, about a mile from where you are, something like 600-700 meters from where the Capitol building is. And that is clearly the concern of law enforcement in this town. If we look that way, you can see you can see the fences fencing off the Capitol, and beyond that, police officers in riot gear. I have to say, in amongst this crowd, they are walking peacefully, very loud, police officers taking a lot of abuse, but in terms of what I've seen in the past half hour, it's been a peaceful march along Constitution Avenue, away from the Capitol. There have been clashes of sorts earlier on with police when demonstrators and police officers came together. Officers used pepper spray to deter them, so that happened earlier on. It also happened after the Netanyahu speech at the tail end of the protest, when demonstrators gathered outside Union Station in the center of Washington, D.C. They ripped down American flags, burnt them, and there was also the burning of an effigy of Benjamin Netanyahu. So at that point, officers moved in and pepper spray was again used, officers in riot gear with protective face masks and so on. But if you take a look down that way, you can see the demonstration as it stands at the moment. They came up this way towards the Capitol earlier on before Netanyahu's speech, gathered outside Union Station, and are now making their way down the street away from the Capitol, now something like a kilometre away from the Capitol building. No suggestion from any of these demonstrators that they were targeting the Capitol itself, but clearly that's where Netanyahu was. That's where America's politicians were gathered for that address. And in this town, they don't need any reminders about invasions of that seat of power. Indeed, only yesterday, there was a protest, a peaceful protest, inside the rotunda at the Capitol, where protesters gathered to make their point, a similar point, against Netanyahu, his presence, and everything that, for them, he represents. And you can take a look at that sign. That's what he represents to the majority of those gathered here today. They accuse Netanyahu of being a war criminal, of genocide. That's the point they have come to make in the streets today. That was a point made in the Capitol building itself by Democrats, politicians who stayed away in protest at Netanyahu's presence. Not present in that chamber, of course, was Kamala Harris. She was elsewhere campaigning in Indianapolis. Normally, she would be sitting on the speaker's forum behind the invited guests as a gesture of welcoming, as a gesture of welcome and respect. She says that she was otherwise engaged, convenient perhaps, given the division inside the Democratic Party about Gaza, policy on Gaza, America's support for Israel and supply of weapons and so on. It's a tricky one. Has been a tricky one for Joe Biden. It will be tricky for Kamala Harris moving forward. And of course, Netanyahu, you take a look that way, we can see the gathered throng static now, still several hundred strong. It's going to be tricky for Kamala Harris moving forward, but more immediately, tricky for Biden. He has a meeting with Netanyahu tomorrow in the White House. He's invited his Secretary of State to be present, delaying a foreign trip. He's invited the families of American hostages to be there, all part of an effort by Biden to lean on Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire, to reach a deal that would represent progress in the Middle East. On the back of the speech that we heard from Netanyahu, Yalda, I have to say that would appear to be a slim hope right now. Not one mention of ceasefire in that speech lasting nearly an hour from the Israeli Prime Minister.
Yeah, and in many ways, James, in this difficult week that we've seen for Joe Biden, extraordinary that Benjamin Netanyahu's arrival has really haunted and reminded people here in the United States of the challenges that Joe Biden has had with Benjamin Netanyahu. During his speech, he thanked Joe Biden for his support and talked about the decades-long relationship that they have had. But in the last 9 or so months, that relationship has had some very challenging moments. You spoke there of his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, making several trips to Israel, to the region, to try and bring both sides together. But this remains a sore point for Joe Biden, because he would want, as part of his legacy, to see that kind of peace that he longed for in the Middle East. But it has created so many divisions here in the United States.
Yeah, it has, and we see that just looking around. We see division. We also see that element that has dogged Joe Biden for months over the course of the Middle East conflict, and his stewardship of it, and his attempts to try to bring about some kind of resolution. These scenes, these protests and protesters, they evoke memories of protests that we've seen sometimes violent over the course of recent months on American college campuses and so on. You know, a protest, a group of demonstrators of a younger generation, many of whom have turned their back on Biden because of the Middle East conflict. And you look at the campaign, Abandon Biden, in places like Michigan, a swing state. He has suffered politically and domestically because of what is happening under his stewardship. He has been seen to have a lack of authority and a lack of leadership in terms of shaping world events. That has weakened him. And we're reminded of that today in these scenes of demonstrations, in the empty chairs we saw inside the Capitol building, and in the words of Benjamin Netanyahu. There was nothing in what Netanyahu, a belligerent Netanyahu, said that gave us any hint he is of a mind to meet the moment with Joe Biden and to meet the expectations, hope more than expectation, of any kind of agreement that amounts to anything resembling progress towards peace. Remember, Netanyahu and Biden, they are two men who loathe each other. Biden is invested in his legacy, but Netanyahu is by no means invested in giving Biden his crowning moment as he makes his way out the door of the Oval Office. So to that extent, Biden is on the back foot. But there's also the business of the longer term. What would it be worth for Biden and Netanyahu to reach some kind of agreement tomorrow or in the short term, given that Biden's only got 6 months left? And who knows who could be in the White House after November? For that very reason, Netanyahu has scheduled a meeting with Donald Trump. He's flying to Mar-a-Lago in Florida on Friday, and buoyed by the support he's had from the Republican Party, who's to say that he doesn't regard Trump as the better prospect for reaching some kind of deal with, because Trump looks like, in terms of the polls, he could be the president come November, but a deal with Trump, more so than with Biden, might factor in the long-term political survival for Benjamin Netanyahu, which of course he wants, and which is in jeopardy given growing opposition that he faces back home.
Yeah, James, as you say, for Biden, it might be about legacy. For Netanyahu, it is about political survival. And let's bring in the perspective on that speech from the Middle East. Let's speak to our John Sparks, who's there in Jerusalem for us. And John, it's quite late in the evening there in Israel, in Jerusalem as well. But just give us a sense, has there been reaction to Netanyahu's speech?
Well, early days, but look, you know, he's not a popular figure in Israel. There are lots of people who didn't want him to go. They didn't want it. They accused him of grandstanding making this trip. A lot of people wanted him to stay here to work on securing the hostages. There is a view that the best way to do that is to come up with a ceasefire deal with Hamas to get the hostages out. So yeah, people unhappy, a lot of people unhappy that he is in the United States speaking to Congress. They think he's grandstanding, that he's wasting his time that could be better spent elsewhere doing other things. You know, listening to the speech, though, I thought bellicose, loud, proud, utterly unapologetic. I thought, interestingly, that Netanyahu was trying to bind Israel and the United States in an ever-tightening embrace. And he really expanded on his worldview, didn't he? He said Iran was behind virtually all of the chaos, the killing, the terrorism in the Middle East. He said it was Israel that was protecting the United States from Iran. Without Israel, he said, the Americans might have to put boots on the ground in the Middle East. And then he got to his asks in the speech, and boy, did he have asks. He wants the Americans to expedite weapons deliveries to Israel so they can finish the job against Hamas. And he really reflected on the fact that Israel is increasingly isolated in the world. He went on at length about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the prosecutor there seeking an arrest warrant against Netanyahu for war crimes. Again, he is seeking American friendship and support. And then I thought, interestingly, there were the things that he didn't talk about at all, like a ceasefire. We know that negotiators are working on a ceasefire deal. American negotiators say that the parties are close to a deal. But you know what? Netanyahu did not sound like a man who was ready to put pen to paper to sign up to any sort of truce. The very opposite, in fact. He said he was committed to total victory against Hamas.
And the pressure, though, from families of the hostages in Israel is mounting on Benjamin Netanyahu for some kind of deal to be reached. We've seen those demonstrations in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, asking him to take action, to do something. And like you say, it doesn't appear at this stage like he is willing to strike that deal.
No, it really doesn't. He didn't talk about the prospects of any kind of negotiated settlement, any sort of negotiation in that speech at all. He was talking about his total and utter commitment to victory against Hamas, and he said it was the Americans' responsibility to help him do it. Yet he is under huge political pressure here, but he has been able to resist it since the very beginning of the conflict. He has been able to do that. He has people who sit to the right of him in his administration. They say that they will withdraw their support from Benjamin Netanyahu. So he is, in a sense, in the middle of a very complex political situation here with multiple factions to the left of him, to the right. His supporters on the right say, do a peace deal, come up with a ceasefire with Hamas, and we'll withdraw our support and your government will fall. But certainly the argument that has been made by many people, including Biden, is that he looks like he is trying to extend the war to maintain his position in power. Still, Netanyahu today, he looked like he was fully committed to continuing the fight. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
A fight that has lasted 9 months and 39,000 dead in Gaza.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, let's talk about tonight. Let's talk about the last couple of days, shall we? The Israelis engaged in major operations around the city of Rafah. Again, while we understand that negotiators are busy in Cairo, busy in Qatar. We understand that an Israeli negotiation team is ready to fly out to Qatar perhaps on Thursday to tie up some sort of deal. But simultaneously, I can tell you that the Israelis are engaged in major operations in Gaza, around Rafah in the south, around the city of Khan Yunis in central Gaza. And while Netanyahu was speaking tonight in Washington, airstrikes in northern Gaza as well. More than 100 people, 129 according to the Gaza Health Ministry, have been killed in the last couple of days. So, this war, it's not ending, it's continuing. In fact, what we're hearing is that there has been a real intensification over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, an incredibly challenging and difficult, devastating situation for Gazans there, and they would remain further devastated listening to Benjamin Netanyahu address Congress here in the United States, as have the protesters who have gathered here, thousands, John, who have gathered here and remain on the streets protesting outside of Congress. They weren't able to get anywhere near it, but in and around the area.
Yeah, I mean, extraordinary. I mean, he is one of the most divisive figures in world politics, isn't he? He's one of the most divisive leaders in the world. But as we heard in that speech, he's not making any apologies for it. He's got He's got a position, he's got a philosophy, which he expounded on in his speech, that Iran is behind the terrorism, the chaos, the killings in the Middle East. It does it, he said, through its axis of evil by supporting groups like Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. It is the Iranians who are behind everything. And he said they can be defeated. They will be defeated. That Israel and the Americans can and will do it together. But again, seeking to bind the Americans into an ever closer relationship with the Israelis, I am sure, in the United States, that will make very uncomfortable listening for people in the political center, for people on the political left.
Yeah, and as you've been reporting, John, as we've all been reporting for the last 9 months on the situation in Gaza, we've also talked at length about the tens of thousands of children that have been left injured and in desperate need of medical attention. Well, let's speak now to someone who can join us from Madrid tonight and who is helping children be evacuated out of Gaza and to Spain. Tarek Haylat, who heads the Treatment Abroad program for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Thank you very much, Tarek, for joining us here on the program. I first of all want to get your reaction to what we were hearing. I don't know if you heard Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress, but he talked about the effort that his government, Israel, has been making to get aid into Gaza. He talked about the situation in Gaza not being one of famine. Just tell us about what you've been seeing and the people that you've been speaking to, of course, and the children that you've evacuated.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think this is an extremely important topic to talk about. Just an hour and a half ago, I welcomed the children here in Madrid, and it was an extremely emotional moment. You know, you're extremely excited to see these children that are finally going to receive the treatment that they deserve. But at the same time, you have a sense of guilt because while these 15 children were extremely lucky to be able to be brought here, there's thousands and thousands inside of Gaza that need desperate help. And actually, even this mission itself, I mean, it was an amazing mission between us and the World Health Organization and the European Union. Even this mission, we shifted our focus from patients that we've already evacuated from Gaza prior to the Rafah border being occupied. And the reason for that is because it was so difficult to pull them out from Gaza.